Think about what human life looked like even just a few generations ago: lifting, hauling, pushing, carrying. And that was just Tuesday. Your great grandparents weren't going to the gym. They didn't need to. Muscles were under load much of the day simply as a condition of being alive. We've engineered almost all of that out of our daily existence. We sit to work, we sit to eat. In fact, if you're watching me on YouTube right now, you'll notice that I have a standing desk to do this for the very reason that I don't want to sit to do all this stuff. And I do stand most of the day. So that is one thing that I've implemented. I think I started standing about 5 years ago to do the podcast. I also stand to write the podcast. I stand to work on my formulas. About 80% of my day, my work day anyway, is spent standing. And I highly recommend that as well. But the point is that we generally are very stationary. Welcome to Vitality Radio, the podcast that helps you make sense of natural supplements and thrive without pharma drugs. I'm Jared St. Clair. I grew up in a health food store and spent over 40 years now figuring out what works and what doesn't, so that you can make confident, informed decisions about nutrition, supplements, and your health. Welcome back to Vitality Radio. I'm Jared St. Clair, and today I'm starting something brand new. It's a new series. I've been doing a lot of those this year. We're calling this one Free Medicine. How does that sound? The premise is simple. Every episode, I'm going to give you one habit that costs you absolutely $0. It's not a supplement. It's not a gym membership. It's not any kind of special equipment, red light or whatever. Just something your body was literally built to do that most of us have quietly stopped doing. And the science behind some of these things is genuinely remarkable. Now, to be totally frank with you, I'm not the guy who has always had my fitness habits dialed in. That's actually part of the reason that I wanted to do this series. I know a lot about what goes into your body. I've spent decades in this industry studying ingredients, supplements, formulations, all that kind of stuff, reading, research, but the daily movement stuff has not been consistent with me. I'll tell you, it's really been a work in progress. I find myself very, very busy on a regular basis. Most of it's self-inflicted. Yes, I anticipate you may be one of these people as well. And I mean, I hardly ever spend time on entertainment really, other than travel and listening to music. Usually while I'm working, hardly ever have the TV on, any of that kind of stuff. But while I was making lunch, I was listening to a YouTube video, and it was a doctor talking about push-ups, and it inspired me to do this episode. It's really just been in the last 5 or 6 years, and I'm 53 years old, almost 54, that I've started taking some of these things a little bit more seriously. Not just my diet, not just my supplementation, but actually trying to form habits that will really help me in the long run. Similar to what you might think of financially, with starting early, investing your 401k or whatever it is, those types of things that many of us put off until, it's near retirement age. Well, the same thing can be said about physical fitness. And as I said, I got this idea from a doctor, and I'll tell you, the video was real simple. And what caught my eye, I'd never listened to this guy before. He's a British guy, and I really like him quite a bit, actually. And I don't usually like doctors that much. So I've only watched one video of his, so I can't say that the rest of his stuff's good, but I liked this one a lot. And the title was just do 30 push-ups a day. It'll change your life, or something along those lines. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to check it out. I watched it. I loved it. And I decided I'm going to share it with you. And it sparked the idea for this series. And I'll tell you something else. I've issued a little challenge to my wife and our two daughters that live with us at home. And we're going to do this together, which means I pretty much have to do it now. Nothing like a little family accountability to get you off of the couch or just away from your computer long enough to drop and do 30. So let's get into it. And I'm going to explain why this habit is so incredibly powerful, and why, of course, in our modern age, with so many other things, some of this stuff has kind of gone by the wayside. So the body was not designed for the life that most of us are living right now. Think about what human life looked like even just a few generations ago: lifting, hauling, pushing, carrying. And that was just Tuesday. Your great grandparents weren't going to the gym. They didn't need to. Muscles were under load much of the day simply as a condition of being alive. We've engineered almost all of that out of our daily existence. We sit to work. We sit to eat. In fact, if you're watching me on YouTube right now, you'll notice that I have a standing desk to do this for the very reason that I don't want to sit to do all this stuff. And I do stand most of the day. So that is one thing that I've implemented. I think I started standing about 5 years ago to do the podcast. I also stand to write the podcast. I stand to work on my formulas. About 80% of my day, my work day anyway, is spent standing. And I highly recommend that as well. But the point is that we generally are very stationary, I guess is the right word. We're just not moving like we should. We've got to get that going. And, a lot of times we think about cardiovascular exercise with that. And cardiovascular exercise is fantastic for sure. But this push-up thing is a big deal. And I can't wait to share with you exactly what this can do for you. Let's talk about first something called sarcopenia. Every time that you lower yourself to the floor and push back up, you're loading your chest, your shoulders, your triceps, and your core all at the same time. That mechanical stress activates a cellular pathway called mTOR, your body's master switch for muscle building. When mTOR flips on, it kicks off muscle protein synthesis, which is just your body rebuilding those fibers a little stronger than they were before. One more thing happening at the hormone level, besides the mTOR thing, is that and this doesn't get talked about nearly enough, is when you place mechanical load on your large muscle groups, research shows it directly stimulates testosterone release in men and women, and it enhances your muscle sensitivity to anabolic signals. Resistance exercise appears to be a direct stimulant to testosterone production when sufficient muscle mass is loaded. Most people think of testosterone, of course, as a male hormone, but I think you and my audience know better. Women produce it too, and it is still the dominant hormone in a woman above estrogen, which a lot of people don't actually know. I talked about that on the Just Ingredients podcast just the other day. And so we have to recognize that this is not a man thing. This is a everybody thing. Push-ups and testosterone and how it works for muscle is really, really big, because muscle maintenance is largely because of testosterone. Muscle strength is largely because of testosterone. So I want to talk about maintenance right now. Starting in your 30s, you begin losing muscle mass at a rate of about 3 to 5% per decade. I don't know if that sounds like a lot. That's only 10% by the time you're, 50, but after 50, that rate picks up dramatically. In fact, there's research indicating that we may be losing in America 1% per year after 50. That process is called sarcopenia. Not everybody's ever even heard of sarcopenia, but when I discovered what sarcopenia was years ago, I started talking about it on the show because I think it's a big deal. One of the reasons it's such a big deal, especially for you women in the audience, is osteoporosis. Your bones are living tissue. They are not this, calcified thing like a rock. They are living tissue, and they stay dense because your muscles are pulling on the bones, loading them, sending them a signal that says you're needed. Stay strong for me. When you lose muscle, you lose that mechanical force on the bone. The signal weakens. The bone density follows muscle mass down, often at the same timeline. The research backs this up big time. There's actually a name now for what we're talking about. And years ago that I'm aware of didn't exist, this actual technical name for it. And it's just simply called osteosarcopenia. It's described in the literature as hazardous duet. Studies have consistently found that both muscle strength and muscle mass directly influence bone mineral density, that as muscle changes, bone density changes with it. A 2022 pooled analysis in research literature found that sarcopenia and osteoporosis not only occurred together in the same individuals with striking frequency, but share the same underlying pathways: hormonal, mechanical, inflammatory. They are deeply intertwined, and the data shows that people with sarcopenia have more than twice the risk of a low trauma fracture compared to those without it. So it's not just about the bone, it's very much about the muscle as well. So when I say fight sarcopenia, I mean fight sarcopenia and osteoporosis, because they are truly part of the same battle. Now, how do you fight sarcopenia beyond push-ups? Well, I talk about supplements a lot. Let's talk about that for just a minute. Protein, which of course you don't ever have to get through from a supplement if you don't want to. You can just get it in your diet, And that's one thing that my wife and I have really been focused on lately since we started the GLP-1 metabolic optimizer formula that we came out with a few months ago, is really getting plenty of protein to make sure that while we're losing fat, we are maintaining our muscle, because the last thing we want is to get weaker. That's another reason why I decided to start doing these 30 push-ups a day, which, by the way, I'm actually shooting for 40. But regardless, my goal long term is to get up to 100 or even more than that. But we're starting at 30 or 40. I can do more right now. I'm capable of it, but I'm starting in that range, and we're going to kind of push and see how that goes. And I'll get a little bit more into that here in a minute. But protein is big. It's a really, really big deal for muscle strength, for preventing sarcopenia. So make sure you're getting plenty of protein. There's plenty of literature indicating that 75% of your body weight in protein grams, even up to 100% of your body weight or your lean muscle in protein grams, is a good target to shoot for. Not always easy to do, which is why sometimes, and something that I do every day, is a protein supplement in the Rebuild Plus that we use here at Vitality and that we use at our house. The other supplement you can consider for this, if you haven't already started doing it, and this one almost belongs in the Vital 5 at this point, is creatine. Creatine is massive for skeletal muscle protection and also for muscle endurance, making the push-ups easier, making the recovery from the push-ups easier. A 2024 review in the research literature specifically advocated for combining resistance training with creatine supplementation as a strategy to both treat and prevent sarcopenia. And creatine has also been studied for its effects on bone. Accumulating research shows it has a favorable effect on both aging muscle and on bone mass, which makes sense given what we've talked about. So if you're wondering about brands, I use NutriBio creatine. It's my personal favorite. Of course, the Vital 5 magnesium is a big deal too, because it keeps the muscles more limber, more loose, all that type of thing can help with recovery. And then protein, I use the Rebuild Plus. But this isn't about the supplements. This is about the push-ups. And I do have to tell you one thing, though. I'm just going to put it out there. I don't know exactly when this episode will air. Now that I'm on YouTube, I'm actually recording these about 4 or 5 weeks in advance, which is very new for me. So I don't know, by the time this comes out, we may already have this, but it is in the works. We will have the world's purest creatine in the Vitality label very, very soon. I cannot wait to talk to you about that, because this stuff is phenomenal. Best creatine I've ever found. But let's talk about what else is happening with your body when you're doing push-ups, because it's not just about muscle. In fact, it's shockingly not just about muscle. There's so much more to it. The heart. We talk about cardio when we talk about the heart. We're always talking about heart rate and all that kind of stuff, monitoring our heart rate when we're walking, when we're running, when we're doing high intensity exercise, that kind of stuff. But when you contract large muscle groups hard and repeatedly, your heart has to answer that demand immediately. More blood, more force. Do that consistently, and over weeks and months, your heart adapts to becoming efficient for you. There's a study from Harvard published in 2019 that followed over 1,000 active male firefighters for 10 years. What they found was that the men who could do 40 or more push-ups had dramatically lower rates of cardiovascular disease events over the following decade compared to men who could only manage 10 or fewer. Now that makes sense, right? Just physical fitness alone, but that was done based on push-ups, and the guys that could do 4 times as many push-ups had significantly less heart disease. It matters. Blood sugar, something that many of us are concerned about. I just mentioned the GLP-1 formula and what, my wife and I have been using it. My daughter's using it. We are all about balancing blood sugar. We believe that's a huge part, if not the biggest part, of metabolic health. But what about push-ups? How do they impact that? Well, your muscle is the primary place where your body actually stores and burns glucose, blood sugar. Normally, getting sugar out of the blood and into your cells requires insulin. But something interesting happens when a muscle contracts. It brings glucose transporters to the cell surface on its own, independent of insulin. Research has shown that actively contracting muscles can take up glucose at rates 50 to 100 times higher than resting muscles without needing insulin to make it happen. Every push-up, your muscles are pulling sugar out of your bloodstream directly. The more muscle you have and the more regularly you use it, the better your entire body manages blood sugar around the clock. That matters enormously, because chronically elevated blood sugar and insulin resistance are the upstream drivers of type 2 diabetes. And over decades, they quietly damage your blood vessels, your kidneys, your nerves, your eyes, and just about everything else. What about posture and core? We don't necessarily think of these things when we think of push ups, but a proper push up is not just an investment in your arms or your chest. Holding your body in a straight line from head to heels requires your deep core muscles, your glutes, and your muscles along the spine to fire and stay fired for the entire time. Every push up is essentially a moving plank. Do that consistently, and those stabilizing muscles get stronger, which actually pulls your shoulders back, supports your lower back, and lifts you out of the forward hunched posture that years of desk time and screens can create. When you exercise, even briefly, your working muscles release chemical signals that your brain picks up on and responds to. One of the most important things that follows is a rise in something called BDNF, brain derived neurotrophic factor. Think of it as fertilizer for your neurons. It supports brain cell health, helps form new connections, and helps resist the slow decline that comes with aging. Research consistently shows that people who maintain regular physical activity have meaningfully lower rates of both dementia and depression. Regular exercise has been demonstrated to reduce the risk of developing Alzheimer's after age 65, and a significant part of that connection runs through BDNF. And on a shorter time scale, a burst of physical effort in the morning tends to leave you sharper and more focused for the hours afterwards. Now, let's talk about the habit, because this is really where the rubber meets the road. And here's the thing that I love about this one and why I decided to start episode 1 of Free Medicine this way. Habit is challenging for most of us. It's challenging to make a habit. It's easier to break a habit. We all know this, right? We talk about willpower and everything else. But what I've learned, I guess, about habit is probably a better way to put that, is that if we start with habits that are easy to maintain, we start to build momentum. And the thing that I love about 30 push-ups is it's a minute or two. And what I'm doing is I'm doing half of them in the morning, half of them at night. And that's how I'm building the habit. Like I said, I'm actually shooting for 40, but I recommend at least 30. 40 is great too, 20 in the morning, 20 at night, just depending on your capacity and all that. But you can't really make time an excuse for this, right? Because it literally takes almost no time at all. It takes no equipment, no gym, no commute, no parking, no waiting for a machine that someone else is using while they scroll on their phone. That strips away all the excuses, because time, we already talked about, is also not an excuse. And daily consistency is where real benefit lives. None of these adaptations come from one heroic session. They come from showing up in a small, repeatable way until your body has no choice but to change in a positive fashion. One practical tip worth mentioning is the one I mentioned earlier, splitting those 30 push-ups into 2 sets, morning and later in the day. And this matters actually, not just because it's easier to do, because it actually is easier to do 15 now and 15 later, but because of what I talked about with mTOR. That pathway is activated in the morning when you do 15, and then it gets reactivated in the afternoon when you do another 15, or in the evening. A moderate set flips it on and keeps it active for roughly a day or so. A second, smaller set or similar set later tops up that signal and keeps the building window open longer. You're essentially getting 2 stimuli for the price of 1 daily commitment. And here's something that I've noticed, and I suspect many of you will find the same. When you lock in 1 daily physical habit, as I said before, it starts to pull other things with it. The push-ups lead to a slightly better walk, better bedtime, better meal after you do those 15 push-ups in the morning. Sleep leads to eating with a little bit more intention. Eating with a little more intention leads to more exercise, maybe putting away your phone a little bit more, avoiding the blue light. You know what I mean, right? It's just one thing after another. So starting with small, simple habits that you can commit to and then prove to yourself, because this is important too. This has to do with your reticular activating system. It has to do with how the brain actually works. When we prove to ourselves that we can commit to a thing and do that thing on a consistent basis, we become more adept at doing the next things again and moving into better and better, bigger habits. Now, modifications, let's talk about this. You might be thinking, I can't do 15 push-ups. And if you're not in the type of shape that requires that, that's okay. It's completely fine, because you have to start somewhere. There's no judgment here. There's a lot of things I can't do that I wish I could do. I wish I could do 15 pull-ups. I can't do 15 pull-ups, okay? So I get it. I thankfully am not having any trouble doing the push-ups, which is why I'm already at 40 and I'm going to keep moving up from there. But you may be at 5 or 10. You may not be able to do 1 or 2, depending on your health condition, your status, your age, those types of things. The good news is there's a whole bunch of ways to modify push-ups. You can start on your knees, of course, instead of your toes. Same pushing pattern, less body weight. If that's still too much, hands on the counter, body at an angle. If you need to go easier than that, stand at a wall and push off of it. All of these count. All of them work. The same muscles are firing in the same pattern. The heart still responds. Your bones still get the signal. Your brain still gets the lift. mTOR can still be flipped on. The only variable that changes is how much weight you're actually moving. As you get stronger and you lower the angle, you will move more weight. Wall to counter to knees to floor, your body adapts to each level as you reach it. And one day you look up and you're doing real push-ups and you're doing them easily. So start where you can start, do what you can do, build the habit, keep going. What was interesting, and I'd love you to do this for me on this episode, either on YouTube or in your comments on Spotify, where you can comment on these shows if you'd like, is tell me how this is working for you if you decide to do it. So many commenters on this doctor's video were saying, I've been doing 100 push-ups a day for 5 years and I feel incredible and all this kind of stuff. There's plenty of anecdotal evidence to go with all of the clinical evidence. So let's wrap this up. This episode is the first one of Free Medicine. The short version is simple. 30 push-ups a day fights the muscle loss that starts quietly in your 30s and speeds up after 50. It gives your heart real work. It protects your bones and it protects your brain. There's a Chinese proverb that says the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. That's where I am. I hope that's where you are. That's where my wife and my daughters are. That's probably exactly where a high percentage of people listening to this episode are. So plant the tree today. I will tell you what I plan to do as soon as I hit stop on this recording, as I'm going to drop and do my second 20 because it's the evening now. I already did the ones in the morning. It's time to do my evening ones. If you have any questions about anything you heard on this show or any other questions regarding your health, call us 801-292-6662. Jump on our website, vitalitynutrition.com, or you can check us out in person if you're in Utah. I'd love for you to do that at our South Ogden location, 1735 Skyline, or our Bountiful location, 107 South, 500 West. And if you didn't catch me on the Just Ingredients podcast, you can catch me over there as well. We'll link to that in the show description. We talked a lot about some really fascinating stuff, primarily wrapped around cortisol and how cortisol impacts our health. And I've had a lot of people tell me it was a really useful conversation. So check it out. Thanks so much for joining me on Vitality Radio. I'm Jared St. Clair, and this has been Vitality Radio Podcast. Thanks for listening to the Vitality Radio Podcast. If this episode helped you, follow the show, share it with someone, and explore trusted education and resources at vitalitynutrition.com. See you next time.
Hello, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Vitality Radio. Just a reminder that this podcast is for educational purposes only. This podcast has not been evaluated by the FDA. This podcast is provided with the understanding that the information shared is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. This podcast is not a substitute for professional care by a medical professional. Thank you.